With Shadow of the Erdtree finally on the horizon, you might be looking for a refresher as you return to the lands between. Or maybe you've just started your journey and you're looking for a blueprint for how to make progress. Elden Ring has an almost overwhelming expanse of regions you can explore, each with its own unique and intimidating bosses leading the helm. With an open narrative and an even much more open world, how you want to progress through each encounter can vary. As such, there's no true order that you should fight each boss, but that's not to say you can go and fart your way into becoming the Elden Lord. Some bosses are better tackled early on, while others are better left for later. And while some placements on this list may surprise you, they all have a reason. Let's dive into what we believe is the best boss order for the least painful Soulsborne experience. This is the first meaningful boss pairing that you're likely going to encounter. The game heavily encourages moving in their direction, the guidance of grace leading you right to Stormveil Castle. Compared to the rest, both Marget and Godric are fairly simple. They highly telegraph their attacks and are easily dodged with some practice and experience. Moreover, getting through the castle will grant you some reliable armor and weapons that can carry you throughout most of the game. For most entries, we're also running on the assumption that you'll be fighting the minor bosses in the surrounding area as well, but that's not the case here. Between the Flying Dragon Agheel and the Tree Sentinel, there's a good handful of local minor bosses you should probably ignore until later. While the Leonin Misbegotten is an optional boss encounter, he's one of the most main boss optional bosses you'll find. The final enemy of the Castle Morn area of the Weeping Peninsula, this bestial individual acts as the leader of a misbegotten army that has usurped the castle. He's not the toughest fight with average damage and speed, but he is the perfect transitionary period for a young Tarnished ready to expand outside of Limgrave. It's less treacherous than Liurnia of the Lakes, but provides more challenge and runes than Limgrave. Plus, there's an entire plotline that involves taking him down, and you get a great reward if you do so. Now it's time for all you high-strength melee Unga Bunga builds to have a tough time. Ignore the wretched landscape called Caelid and make your way north to Liurnia of the Lakes. Except for the oddly large and powerful crayfish, most of the creatures in this land should be appropriately challenging for you at this point, though certain builds are going to struggle with the range of the spellcasters in the Academy of Raya Lucaria. Renala is a unique experience with invulnerability phases that transition into an open arena fight. The latter phase sees her go hard on her magical power. Every move hits hard, and the longer you go, the more overwhelming it becomes. Regardless of your build, we recommend rushing her down as safely as possible. Now it's time to backtrack to the east side of Limgrave and into Caelid. This red, rotten landscape is home to only two things: nightmare creatures and the Radan Festival. Once you get past the difficulty, this is one of the most fun boss fights. The unique mechanic of summoning a horde of cooperators to fight alongside you instills a real rallying effect. Don't get cocky though. He still hits like a literal meteor, so you won't last long if you don't play defensively. After that, it's time to take the elevator up to the Altus Plateau, fight through Lane Dell, and take on the reigning king, Morgot. Don't worry about Mount Gelmir and the Volcano Manor just yet. Let's leave that for later. Blocking the way into the Erdtree, Morgot is an essential encounter to continue the plot. Bit of a spoiler here, it's actually the same guy you fought outside Stormveil Castle with the false name of Marget, but that time it was just an illusion he was casting. This is him in his true form. This fight should feel familiar, but more intense at this point. Fortunately, you've had time to level and refine your character build, so assuming you didn't rush too quickly, you should be in the perfect place to fight him now. The next natural step in the main plotline, the Fire Giant is keeping the Crucible Flame, a punishment given to him by Marika. It almost makes killing him a service, really. Whether or not this is a tough fight mostly depends on your build, with ranged and magic users having an easier time. His massive size is an easy target after all. Even so, it's not the toughest fight, and it's better dealt with sooner than later. After the fight though, we cannot stress this enough, do not light the fire yet. That will send you off to a new area called Farum Azula. Before you do that, it's time to return and take care of some of the bosses we skipped. Another completely optional encounter, this one's hidden away in a rather hard to reach location. Just getting there is half the battle, really. Estelle is at the end of the Grand Cloister, which is on the other side of the Lake of Rot, a place as awful as it sounds. Reaching the Lake of Rot requires going through the Ainsel River main, accessed by either going through the Deeproot Depths or from a waystone provided by Ranni. If you can manage to get to this boss, you're strong enough to defeat him. With general weaknesses to physical attacks and a variety of slow, easy to avoid attacks, getting close enough to lay down some heavy strikes shouldn't be too hard. And by this point, you'll be tough enough to survive if you end up taking a couple of hits back. Whether Estelle is considered a main boss is up for debate, but since it's required for the Ranni ending, which we know is the most popular, it deserves mention. From the Winter Wonderland up north to the toxic landscape of the Lake of Rot, you're probably tired of hazardous environments. That's too bad. It's a perfect time now to backtrack to the equally unpleasant landscape of Mount Gelmir, deal with the chaos and nonsense that surrounds Volcano Manor, and engage in the battle against Reichard, a demigod that has since become a giant snake. This encounter forces you, more or less, into using a specific weapon, which can cause some serious lack of flow with whatever build you're rocking. This was the main reason to wait. Dealing with the other challenges first means you're leveled up enough to make up for that lack of optimization. I guess technically you could handle him early if you're confident you can use the weapon here. With the big snake taken care of, there's one more loose end before heading to Farum Azula. The next bearer of a great rune, Mohg, is the secluded demigod kidnapping Lord of Blood, looming over a terribly inhospitable landscape only accessible via teleportation. reputation. He's been swooning over a slumbering Mikola and preparing to raise an army from blood magic. Depending on which side quest you do, this encounter could happen as soon as Liurnia of the Lakes, but given his powerful bleed effects and hard to avoid attacks, it's better to wait until now. We also recommend heading to the Second Church of America to pick up the Purifying Crystal Tear for your Wondrous Physic to prepare for this one. By the way, this is the guy you're gonna have to find and beat if you want to access the DLC. It's finally time to head to Tornado Town now, aka Farum Azula. Make your way through the floating broken landscape to Malekith. Masquerading as the Beast Clergyman, this dog-like monster man holds the Rune of Death, which is what you need. It's a tough-as-nails battle, where a constant bombardment of attacks is made extra spicy with a health-draining flame effect. Taking on all those other bosses first should provide a much-needed rune boost to help make this battle more tolerable, but even then, it won't be a walk in the park. This is a Souls game after all. At this point, no one is left short of the final boss. That means it's time for her. An incredibly capable fighter, she's held back by an affliction called Scarlet Rot. Despite this, there's a reason we saved her for as late as possible. Millennia is infamous among the Elden Ring community for good reason. Unless you're the legendary Let Me Solo Her, this fight's gonna hurt. Her two-phase boss battle is full of overwhelmingly fast attacks, which restore her health with each successful strike. In our opinion, she is the hardest boss in the entire game. The only reason she isn't placed last is that the final boss is, like it says in the tin, the final encounter you can do in a playthrough. With everyone else taken care of, it's finally time to end things and become the Elden Lord. It begins with taking down Godfrey, an encounter that begins as a fairly normal battle between warriors, but deal enough damage and it evolves into the most hardcore episode of WrestleMania you've ever seen. Our sympathies to all the shield bros for this battle. It's far more advantageous to dodge here. Once he's out of the way, the final boss remains, none other than Radagon. You've heard much about him and Marika until now, learning about their actions and motivations while killing off their children one at a time. Aesthetically, it's a beautiful battle with a dark background contrasting against the bright glow of his Golden Order powers as he smashes you with his hammer. Take him out, watch the cutscene, and then finally, the real final boss, the Elden Beast, the living incarnation of the concept of order, the vessel of the two fingers. This beast was born alongside the Elden Ring itself, and it works to protect it. This fight is even more dramatic, with a visually stunning encounter occurring outside existence and within the stars. Taking place immediately after Radagon, there's no healing beforehand. The immense stakes contrast the sometimes calm and melodic moments beautifully. A fitting end, we say. So that's the order we recommend, but by all means, feel free to tackle the main bosses differently. This is just the simplest in terms of matching the progression of the player. Nothing in this game comes easy, and there's plenty to keep you distracted in the lands between. So if you're not a veteran of Soulsborne games, don't feel discouraged if none of this is as simple as it seems. Thanks so much for watching, and make sure you check out thegamer.com for more lists like these. Do I have time to beat the game before Shadow of the Erdtree drops?